I'm Alexis Crawford, 28, hiding behind a marble pillar at Madison's wedding reception, watching the Reynolds family celebrate in their mansion. Dad made me promise to stay away, said these millionaires would look down on me. But I couldn't miss my sister's day. My heart stops when Brandon Reynolds, her new brother-in-law, suddenly appears beside me with a knowing smile. You must be the mysterious sister. I've been looking for someone with exactly your qualifications. Before I dive into this wild story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been the black sheep of the family or felt like someone was keeping you from opportunities you deserved. Trust me, this story will show you that sometimes the doors others try to close for you lead to opportunities beyond your wildest dreams. 3 years earlier, my life had been so different. Fresh out of business school with my MBA, I was living in a tiny apartment in Boston, juggling student loans and an entry-level position at a marketing firm that barely utilized my skills. I was passionate about sustainable business practices and had written my thesis on how corporations could implement environmentally responsible policies while actually increasing their profitability. But in the real world, no one seemed interested in my ideas. Madison and I had always been close despite our different personalities and paths. While I was the serious, academic type, Madison had a natural charisma and eye for fashion that helped her climb the ranks in the highly competitive fashion industry. We grew up middle class in a suburb of Chicago, raised by our father Richard after our mother passed away when I was 8 and Madison was 10. Dad worked hard as an engineer to provide for us, though I always sensed there was something more to his story than he let on. When Madison called me screaming with excitement that she'd met someone special, I was genuinely happy for her. Ethan Reynolds seemed perfect on paper, handsome, wealthy, and apparently madly in love with my sister. But when she mentioned his family-owned Reynolds Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate with interests spanning technology, real estate, and manufacturing, I noticed something strange. Dad's expression darkened when she mentioned the Reynolds name at our next family dinner. "That's wonderful, honey," he had said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Just be careful in that world. It's very different from ours." Over the next year, Madison became immersed in Ethan's elite social circle. Our weekly sister brunches became monthly, then sporadically scheduled between her trips to Paris, Monaco, and the Hamptons. I missed her but was happy she'd found love, even if it meant growing apart. When Ethan proposed with a diamond the size of a grape, Madison was ecstatic. She immediately asked me to be her maid of honor, and I accepted, thrilled to be included in her happiness. But as wedding preparations ramped up, Dad grew increasingly distant and agitated. Then came the conversation that shattered my relationship with both Madison and my father. Dad asked me to meet him for coffee one rainy Tuesday afternoon. His face was grave when he arrived. "Alexis, I need to ask you something difficult," he began, his hands wrapped tightly around his cup. "I think it would be best if you kept a low profile during Madison's wedding preparations. Maybe just attend the ceremony quietly." I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about? I'm the maid of honor." He sighed heavily. "The Reynolds family. They move in different circles. They're not just rich, they're powerful. Old money. They'll look down on your ordinary background, your job struggles. It might create problems for Madison." "My ordinary background? Dad, that's Madison's background too," I argued, hurt blooming in my chest. "You don't understand, William Reynolds. He's not someone you want to cross. For Madison's sake, please, just stay in the background." The betrayal cut deep. My own father thought I wasn't good enough, that I might embarrass them. Worse, when I tearfully called Madison, expecting her to be outraged on my behalf, she hesitated. "Maybe Dad has a point, Lex," she said softly. "The Reynolds are particular about appearances. You know I love you, but this wedding is important for my future. Maybe you could just be a bridesmaid instead?" I was demoted from maid of honor to bridesmaid, and then gradually excluded from most of the planning events. The final straw came when my invitation arrived, requesting my presence at the ceremony only, not the exclusive reception at the Reynolds estate. Despite the pain, I agreed to keep a low profile. I loved Madison and wanted her happiness. But as the wedding day approached, watching my sister become someone I barely recognized, I made a decision. I was going to attend that reception, invitation or not. I deserved to be part of my sister's complete day, and no amount of class prejudice was going to stop me. I never expected that decision would change the entire trajectory of my life. The Reynolds estate sprawled across 10 acres of prime Connecticut real estate, a neo-Georgian mansion with manicured gardens that looked like something from a period drama. Security was tight, but I had Madison's bridesmaid entry card and simply slipped in through a side entrance during a shift change. The reception was in full swing, crystal chandeliers reflecting off champagne flutes as a string quartet played in the corner. From my hidden vantage point behind a massive marble pillar, I observed the Reynolds family in their natural habitat. William Reynolds, patriarch and CEO, commanded attention even in stillness. Tall and imposing with silver hair and cold blue eyes, he moved through the crowd like a shark, people parting before him. Patricia Reynolds, his wife, was elegantly coiffed and surgically preserved, her smile practiced as she air-kissed guests. Ethan, Madison's new husband, seemed almost a pale imitation of his father. Handsome but with something weak in his jaw, constantly glancing at his father for approval. Then there was Brandon Reynolds, the older brother and, according to the society pages I'd studied, the black sheep of the family. He was supposed to be the heir apparent to Reynolds Enterprises, but had developed a reputation for questioning his father's business practices and advocating for corporate responsibility, positions that apparently made him unsuitable in William's eyes. Unlike the rest of his family, Brandon's smile seemed genuine as he conversed with guests, his posture relaxed rather than calculated. I was so focused on observing him that I didn't notice when he broke away from his conversation and headed directly toward my hiding spot. My heart raced as he approached. Had someone reported me? Was I about to be escorted out in humiliation? "You must be Alexis," Brandon said, extending his hand with a warm smile. "I've been hoping to meet you." I blinked in surprise. "How do you know who I am?" "You look like Madison, but with more substance behind the eyes. Plus, you're the only person here trying not to be seen, which matches what I've heard about the mysterious excluded sister." Heat rose to my cheeks. I wasn't invited to the reception. "I know," he said simply. "My father can be particular about controlling the guest list, but I'm glad you came anyway. Shows character." Something in his tone made me suspicious. "Have you been looking for me specifically?" Brandon's eyes sparkled with intelligence. "Actually, yes. I've been researching you, Alexis Crawford. Your thesis on sustainable corporate practices was brilliant. I particularly liked your model for transitioning manufacturing processes to reduce carbon footprint while improving worker conditions and maintaining profit margins." I nearly dropped my stolen champagne. "You read my thesis? How did you even find it?" "I make it my business to find good ideas, and yours are exceptional." He leaned in slightly. "Reynolds Enterprises is developing a new environmental division, and I need someone with fresh perspectives to help lead it. Someone uncorrupted by my father's old-school business philosophy." "Are you offering me a job?" I asked incredulously. "A junior executive position with potential for rapid advancement. The salary would triple what you're making now, plus stock options." My suspicion deepened. This seemed too convenient. "Why would you offer a job to someone you just met? Someone your family apparently doesn't approve of?" Brandon's expression turned serious. "Because you're exactly what our company needs, and perhaps because I'm curious why your father is so adamant about keeping you away from us." "My father thinks your family would look down on me," I said carefully. Brandon studied me, his gaze thoughtful. "I think there's more to it than that." "Richard Crawford, right?" The name seems familiar somehow. Before I could respond, I noticed William Reynolds looking in our direction with narrowed eyes. Brandon noticed too and smoothly handed me his business card. "Your father doesn't want us to meet for his reasons. I have my own reasons for wanting to know you, Alexis. Call me Monday if you're interested in the position." With that, he melted back into the crowd, leaving me clutching his card and wondering what game I had just stumbled into. The confrontation with my father couldn't wait. After sneaking out of the reception, I drove straight to his house, anger and confusion fueling me through the night. It was nearly midnight when I pounded on his door. Dad opened it in his bathrobe, eyes widening when he saw me. "Alexis, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" I pushed past him into the living room. "No, everything is not okay." I went to the reception. His face fell. "Alexis, I asked you not to." "I met Brandon Reynolds," I interrupted, watching his reaction carefully. He knew who I was, he'd read my thesis, and he offered me a job. The color drained from Dad's face. He sank into his armchair, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. "You can't take it," he said hoarsely. "Why?" I demanded, tossing Brandon's business card onto the coffee table. "And don't tell me it's because I'm not good enough for their world. Brandon seems to think I'm qualified. What's the real reason you've been trying to keep me away from the Reynolds family?" Dad stared at the card like it might bite him. The silence stretched between us until finally, he spoke, his voice hollow. "I worked for William Reynolds, 30 years ago." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "What? You never told us you worked for Reynolds Enterprises." "Because I wanted to forget it ever happened." Dad's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the photo album on the bookshelf. He pulled out an old photograph I'd never seen before, a younger version of himself standing next to a younger William Reynolds, both smiling in front of a blueprint. I was a junior engineer with big ideas. William was still building his company. I developed an innovative cooling system for industrial processors, would have revolutionized energy consumption in manufacturing. I shared it with William, trusted him. Dad's voice hardened. 3 months later, I was fired for budgetary reasons. 6 months after that, Reynolds Enterprises patented my cooling system with William's name on the patent. I stared at him, shocked. "He stole your idea?" "He built his fortune on it. That system became the foundation for Reynolds Enterprises' manufacturing division. It made him billions." Dad laughed bitterly. "I considered fighting it legally, but who was I? Just an engineer with no proof and no money for lawyers." He had teams of attorneys and unlimited resources. The pieces started falling into place. So when Madison started dating Ethan, I was terrified, Dad admitted. Terrified William would recognize me, or worse, recognize you as my daughter. "You look so much like I did at your age, and you have the same mind for innovation." I couldn't bear the thought of him doing to you what he did to me. "But Madison doesn't look like me. She takes after your mother's side, and she's not an engineer or businessman. She was safer." He looked up, his eyes pleading. "I was trying to protect you, Alexis. William Reynolds destroys people who get in his way." I paced the room, processing this bombshell. "So you let me think I wasn't good enough. You let Madison push me aside. You made me feel worthless to protect your grudge?" "It's not a grudge, it's a warning. Brandon offering you a job out of nowhere? That's not coincidence. They're playing some kind of game. Or maybe Brandon recognized talent," I shot back. "Maybe he's not like his father." Dad stood up, agitated. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree in families like that. Please, Alexis, stay away from them. I'm begging you." In that moment, something hardened inside me. My entire life I'd trusted my father's judgment, deferred to his wisdom. But he'd lied to me, damaged my relationship with my sister, and tried to hold me back professionally. All because of something that happened before I was born. "I'm going to make my own decisions," I said quietly, picking up Brandon's card from the table. "Starting with taking this job interview." "Alexis, please." "No, Dad, you don't get to decide who I am or what opportunities I pursue. Not anymore." I headed for the door, pausing to look back at him. "And if you ever truly believed in me, you'd know I'm smart enough not to get taken advantage of, even by the Reynolds family." I left him standing there, looking broken and afraid. Part of me ached to go back, to comfort him and promise to stay away from the people who had hurt him. But a stronger part recognized this as my moment of independence. My sister had chosen her path with the Reynolds family. Now I would choose mine, eyes wide open. Monday morning, I called Brandon Reynolds and accepted his offer for an interview. I told myself I was doing it for my career, for the opportunity. But deep down, I knew part of me wanted justice for my father, even if he was too afraid to seek it himself. I just had no idea how complicated that justice would become. Reynolds Enterprises headquarters dominated the Boston skyline, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. I adjusted my navy blue suit, the most expensive outfit I owned, purchased specifically for this interview, and took a deep breath before pushing through the revolving doors. Brandon had fast-tracked my application. 2 phone interviews, a background check, and a skills assessment later, I found myself with a job offer that made my hands tremble when I saw the number. The salary was indeed triple what I'd been making, with benefits that included stock options, unlimited vacation, and a signing bonus that would clear my student debt in one swoop. It seemed too good to be true, which is why part of me remained deeply suspicious. Alexis Crawford for Brandon Reynolds, I told the sleek receptionist. Ah, our new rising star. She smiled, handing me a security badge. Mr. Reynolds asked me to send you straight up. 18th floor. The elevator whisked me upward, my stomach churning with a mix of excitement and dread. Was I walking into an opportunity or a trap? Was I about to build my career or merely seeking revenge for my father? I honestly wasn't sure anymore. The elevator doors opened directly into a modern, open-plan executive suite. Brandon was waiting, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that somehow looked more relaxed than formal on his athletic frame. "Welcome to Reynolds Enterprises," he said, extending his hand with a warm smile that didn't quite mask the calculation in his eyes. "Ready for the grand tour?" Brandon showed me through the gleaming headquarters, introducing me to key personnel with a casual authority that suggested he was well respected despite the rumors about his contentious relationship with his father. I noticed how employees straightened when he approached, their reactions a mix of genuine respect and wariness. "The environmental division will be housed on the 16th floor," Brandon explained as we walked. "We're starting small, just you and a team of 5 initially, but with aggressive growth projections." My father finally agreed to the division after years of pressure, though I suspect it's more for PR than conviction. "And what exactly will my role be?" I asked, still unclear on the specifics despite the multiple interviews. "You'll be developing and implementing sustainability protocols across all our manufacturing divisions, with direct reporting lines to me. It's a bigger job than your title suggests, but titles can be politically sensitive around here." As we rounded a corner, Brandon lowered his voice. "Fair warning, my father runs this place like a feudal kingdom. Loyalty is valued above competence. Ideas are judged by who presents them rather than their merit. It's toxic, and it's precisely what I'm trying to change." Before I could respond, a commanding voice called out, "Brandon, there you are." William Reynolds approached us with the confident stride of a man used to controlling every room he entered. Up close, he was even more intimidating than at the wedding. Tall and broad-shouldered despite being in his 60s, with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. "Father, this is Alexis Crawford, our new Sustainability Implementation Manager." William's gaze swept over me assessingly, lingering momentarily on my face in a way that made my heart race. Did he recognize something of my father in me? After a pause that stretched just a beat too long, he extended his hand. "Welcome to Reynolds Enterprises, Miss Crawford. Brandon speaks highly of your credentials." "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I'm excited for the opportunity." Something flickered in his eyes, doubt, perhaps, or the faintest hint of recognition, before his expression smoothed back to professional cordiality. "Just ensure your environmental initiatives don't interfere with our productivity targets. This company wasn't built by prioritizing trees over profits. The best sustainability practices enhance profits, not diminish them," I replied evenly. That was the central thesis of my graduate research. William's eyebrows rose slightly, either impressed or annoyed by my directness. I couldn't tell which. "We'll see, won't we?" With a curt nod, he continued down the hallway, his assistant scurrying to keep up. "That went well," Brandon murmured, guiding me onward. "He didn't have you escorted out immediately." We completed the tour with a stop at what would be my office, a surprisingly spacious corner space with windows overlooking the harbor. As I admired the view, I noticed something odd. "This seems unusually large for a manager position." Brandon leaned against the doorframe. It was available, and strategically useful. I turned to face him. "Strategically useful how?" He pointed across the hall. "That's my office. And down there," he indicated the corner suite at the end of the corridor, "is my father's Boston office. He's usually at the New York headquarters, but he visits often enough." His expression turned serious. "Having you between us is convenient." The implication was clear. I was being positioned as more than just a sustainability manager. I was being placed at the center of a power struggle between father and son. Before I could respond, a familiar voice called my name. "Alexis?" Madison stood in the hallway, staring at me in shock. She looked immaculate in designer clothes, her wedding ring catching the light as she clutched a portfolio to her chest. "What are you doing here?" she asked, confusion and something like fear in her eyes. Brandon answered smoothly, "Alexis is our new sustainability implementation manager, starting today." Madison's gaze darted between us, processing this information. "You're working here? Since when? Why didn't you tell me?" "It happened quickly," I said, uncomfortable with her obvious distress. "And we haven't exactly been in close contact lately." Madison pulled me aside, lowering her voice urgently. "Alexis, you can't work here. You don't understand what you're getting into." "What's that supposed to mean?" Her eyes were pleading. "This company, this family, it's all politics and manipulation. Everyone has an agenda." "Including your husband?" I asked pointedly. She flinched. "Especially Ethan's family. Please, just trust me on this." "Like you trusted me when you excluded me from your reception?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Pain flashed across Madison's face. "That wasn't. I didn't have a choice." "We always have choices, Madison. I've made mine." Brandon cleared his throat. "Madison, Ethan was looking for you. Something about the charity gala next week." My sister hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, but nodded tightly and walked away, casting one last worried glance over her shoulder. As I watched her go, Brandon moved to stand beside me. Family dynamics. Always complicated, aren't they? I turned to face him directly. "Let's get one thing clear. Whatever game you're playing by hiring me, I'm not a pawn. I'm here to do real work and make a real impact." Brandon studied me for a long moment, then smiled slowly. "I never thought you were a pawn, Alexis. I think you might be the queen on this chessboard. You just don't know it yet." As he walked away, I stood in my new office, caught between exhilaration and dread. I'd just stepped into the heart of a corporate battlefield with decades of history I only partially understood. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Brandon Reynolds hadn't hired me simply for my sustainability expertise. He was preparing for war with his father, and somehow, I was a key part of his strategy. 2 months passed in a whirlwind of meetings, presentations, and late nights at the office. Despite my initial suspicions, I found myself thriving at Reynolds Enterprises. My sustainability initiatives were gaining traction, particularly a manufacturing overhaul that promised to reduce carbon emissions by 30% while cutting costs by 15%. My team respected me, and I'd earned allies across departments with my straightforward approach and willingness to listen. Brandon proved to be a supportive superior, championing my ideas in executive meetings and providing resources when needed. Our professional relationship evolved into something that felt like friendship, late-night strategy sessions, lunch meetings that extended well past the hour mark as we debated the future of sustainable business, and a growing sense of shared purpose. "You've exceeded every expectation," Brandon told me one evening as we reviewed quarterly projections in his office. "The board is impressed, though my father would rather die than admit it." I laughed, more comfortable with him now. "William still looks at me like I'm a particularly puzzling math problem." "He looks at everyone that way," Brandon replied, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. He hesitated, then continued more carefully. "William built this company through sheer force of will, and other means that wouldn't bear scrutiny." "What do you mean?" Brandon opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "I've been researching the company's history, particularly examining how my father acquired certain patents and intellectual properties over the years." My heart rate quickened as he spread documents across his desk. "These are patent applications from the early days of Reynolds Enterprises. Notice anything?" I scanned the papers, my blood running cold. Each patent application had William Reynolds listed as the inventor, but the supporting technical documentation was written in distinctly different writing styles, as if different people had actually created the innovations. "He didn't invent these," I said quietly. "No. He acquired them from employees, partners, and in some cases, competitors who mysteriously went bankrupt shortly after developing breakthrough technologies." Brandon's eyes held mine. "Your father was Richard Crawford, wasn't he?" The direct question caught me off guard. I'd been careful not to mention my father's history with the company. "Yes. How did you know?" I finally remembered where I'd heard the name. "There's a cooling system patent from 1994 that revolutionized our manufacturing division." My father claims credit, but when I dug through archived documents, I found earlier drafts with your father's name on them. My fingers trembled slightly as I touched the papers. My father told me William stole his idea. It's why he warned me away from your family. Brandon nodded grimly. It wasn't just your father. There's a pattern spanning decades. The realization of what Brandon was doing hit me. You're building a case against your own father. Someone needs to hold him accountable. The board respects success, but they won't tolerate fraud if it's proven. His expression hardened. My father is planning to name Ethan as his successor, despite the fact that Ethan has no vision or real understanding of the business. And you think you should be CEO instead? I stated rather than asked. I know I should, not for ego, but because this company needs to evolve beyond my father's win at all costs mentality. The future belongs to companies that understand sustainability isn't just environmental, it's about sustainable business practices, ethical leadership, and innovation that serves humanity, not just shareholders. His passion was compelling, and I found myself wanting to believe him, but caution kept me reserved. Why tell me this? Why show me these documents? Because I trust you, and because your father deserves justice. Brandon leaned forward. Help me build this case, Alexis. Together, we can transform Reynolds Enterprises while righting historical wrongs. The offer was tempting, too tempting. It aligned with both my professional ambitions and my personal desire to vindicate my father. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Need to talk. Urgent. Meet for lunch tomorrow? Madison had been increasingly distant since discovering I was working at Reynolds. Our weekly sister lunches had dwindled to brief, strained exchanges in hallways. This sudden urgency concerned me. I need to think about this, I told Brandon, gathering my things. It's a lot to process. He nodded, understanding. Take your time, but remember, my father won't hesitate to discard anyone who threatens his legacy, including his own son. The next day, I waited at Madison's favorite cafe, but she never showed. Instead, I received another text. Can't make it. Ethan found out. Sorry. Alarmed, I tried calling her, but the call went straight to voicemail. Returning to the office, I was restless with worry about Madison and conflicted about Brandon's proposition. I decided to stay late, using the quiet evening hours to catch up on work and clear my head. As I walked through the deserted executive floor toward the elevator, voices from William's office caught my attention. Brandon is becoming a problem. William's distinctive bass carried through the partially open door. His environmental crusade is undermining my authority. The board seems to support his initiatives, another voice responded. Ethan's, I realized with surprise. The sustainability projects are generating positive press. The board sees dollar signs and good PR. They don't understand that giving Brandon any victory encourages his delusions of taking over. William's voice hardened. I built this company. I decide its future. And you, Ethan, are its future, not your idealistic brother. What about the new manager Brandon hired? Crawford? Ethan asked. She's gaining influence. There was a pause before William responded, his tone suddenly thoughtful. Crawford, I knew someone by that name once. Engineer with interesting ideas. Should we be concerned about her? I'm having her investigated. If she becomes problematic, we'll deal with her before the succession announcement. I won't allow anyone to derail your ascension, son. My blood ran cold as I backed away from the door. William was planning to fire me, or worse, and seemed to be connecting dots about my identity. I retreated to my office, mind racing. Opening my computer, I began searching the company database, looking for anything related to my father's patent. After an hour of digging through digital archives, I found it, the original proposal my father had submitted, complete with his signature and date, followed by patent applications 6 months later with William's name substituted as the inventor. The evidence was unmistakable. As I downloaded the files to a secure drive, my office door opened. I jumped, expecting security or worse, but it was Brandon. Working late? He asked, closing the door behind him. I just overheard your father and Ethan, I said, voice low. They're planning to deal with me before some succession announcement. Brandon's expression darkened. The annual shareholder meeting. It's in 3 weeks. My father plans to officially name Ethan as his successor. He also mentioned something about investigating me. Then we need to move quickly. What have you found? I showed him the documents I'd discovered. This proves my father's claim. The cooling system was his invention, not your father's. Brandon studied the evidence, nodding slowly. This is exactly what we need. But there's more at stake than just your father's patent. If we're going to change this company, we need to expose the full extent of my father's fraudulent practices. I hesitated, the weight of what we were considering settling over me. This won't just change the company, Brandon. It will destroy your father, and possibly hurt Madison's husband in the process. Brandon's eyes met mine, determination evident. Some structures need to be torn down before they can be rebuilt properly. The question is, are you willing to help me demolish this one? In that moment, I thought of my father's broken dreams, Madison's increasing distance, and the growing evidence of William's corrupt business practices. I thought of the potential for Reynolds Enterprises to become a force for positive change under different leadership. And I made my decision. I'm in, but we do this right, methodically, with irrefutable evidence. Brandon's smile was grim but satisfied. Then let's get to work. We have 3 weeks to build an airtight case. Little did I know that our investigation would uncover depths of corporate corruption beyond what either of us had imagined. Or that the battle ahead would test every relationship in my life to its breaking point. Patricia Reynolds had always struck me as the quintessential corporate wife, elegant, reserved, and seemingly content to exist in her husband's substantial shadow. So when her personal assistant called to invite me to lunch at the exclusive Beacon Hill Club, I was both surprised and suspicious. Nevertheless, I accepted, curious what the Reynolds matriarch wanted from me. The club was old Boston money, all dark wood paneling and hushed conversations. Patricia sat at a corner table, immaculately dressed in a cream Chanel suit, her silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. She smiled as I approached, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Alexis, thank you for joining me. I've been meaning to get to know you better." The pleasantries lasted through the first course, inquiries about my adjustment to the company, compliments on my recent presentation to the board. But as our main courses arrived, Patricia's demeanor shifted subtly. "You know, you look remarkably like your father," she said casually, watching my reaction over her wine glass. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "You knew my father?" "Not personally, but I've seen photos from William's early days at the company." Her perfectly manicured fingers tapped the table lightly. "Richard Crawford, correct? The engineer whose cooling system technology formed the backbone of Reynolds Enterprises' manufacturing division?" There was no point denying it, yes. "I thought so." Patricia dabbed her lips with her napkin. "Let's dispense with the charade, shall we? I know exactly who you are and why Brandon hired you." My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. I was hired for my qualifications. "You were hired because Brandon is building a case against his father, and you're both the smoking gun and the sympathetic victim." Patricia leaned forward slightly. "I admire the strategy, actually. Very comprehensive." "Mrs. Reynolds, Patricia, please." She waved a hand dismissively. "I'm not here to threaten you, Alexis. Quite the opposite." That caught me off guard. "I don't understand. William and I have been married for 40 years. I've watched him build an empire through brilliance, determination, and yes, occasionally, unethical means." Her gaze was steady, unapologetic. "The cooling system was your father's creation, as were several other key innovations that William claimed as his own." The frank admission stunned me. "You knew?" "Of course I knew, just as I know about the other patents, the competitors he crushed, the employees he discarded once he'd extracted their best ideas." She sipped her wine calmly. "William believes the ends justify the means. He built something extraordinary, but at a cost to his soul and to our family." "Why are you telling me this?" Patricia studied me for a long moment. "Because William's time is ending, one way or another. The question is what happens to Reynolds Enterprises afterward." "You support Brandon over Ethan," I realized. "Ethan is my son, and I love him dearly. But he lacks the vision and strength to lead. Brandon understands what this company could be." Her voice softened slightly. "And the company needs to address its past sins before it can have a proper future." She reached into her purse and removed a small flash drive. "This contains records of William's acquisitions over the past 30 years, including the original documentation of your father's cooling system, with his name still attached. I stared at the drive, hardly believing what she was offering. Why would you help take down your own husband? I'm not taking him down. I'm ensuring his legacy doesn't die with him. She placed the drive on the table between us. William built something remarkable, but his methods belong to a different era. For the company to survive, it needs to evolve. Brandon understands this. And what do you want in return? Nothing was free in the Reynolds world. I'd learned that much. Patricia's smile was thin. Just a promise that once this is over, once the company acknowledges its debts to innovators like your father, the family name will be preserved. The company remains Reynolds Enterprises. William retires with dignity, and your father receives proper recognition and compensation for his contributions. It was a calculated offer. Justice for my father without complete destruction of the Reynolds legacy. Before I could respond, Patricia added one more condition. And you'll need to make peace with your sister. Madison is caught in the middle of this family drama, and she's suffering for it. The mention of Madison sent a pang through me. We'd barely spoken in weeks, and our last conversation had devolved into accusations and tears. Madison believed I'd joined Reynolds Enterprises to undermine her new family, while I felt she'd abandoned me to protect her social position. Madison chose her side, I said, more bitterly than I intended. Did she? Patricia raised an eyebrow. Or was she manipulated by a husband who's been manipulated by his father? Ethan isn't malicious, merely weak, and Madison is trying to navigate a world she wasn't prepared for. I thought of my sister's increasingly strained appearance, the dark circles under her eyes at company functions, the way she flinched when William spoke sharply to Ethan. Perhaps Patricia had a point. I'll consider your offer, I said finally, taking the flash drive. But I need to verify this information first. Of course, Patricia signaled for the check. One last thing, Alexis. William suspects something is happening between you and Brandon. He's planning to terminate your position before the board meeting next week. My stomach dropped. How do you know? I've been married to the man for 40 years. I know his patterns. She stood, smoothing her skirt. You have less time than you think. Use it wisely. Back at the office, I locked myself in a conference room and examined the contents of Patricia's flash drive. The evidence was comprehensive and damning, not just regarding my father's patent, but dozens of other innovations William had appropriated over the decades. If released publicly, it would devastate not just William but potentially the entire company. I called Brandon immediately. We need to talk. Not at the office. We met at a quiet bar several blocks from headquarters. After ensuring we wouldn't be overheard, I showed him what his mother had given me. She approached you directly? Brandon seemed genuinely surprised. My mother typically avoids corporate matters. She seems very aware of what's happening, I said, watching his reaction carefully. She wants your father exposed but the family name preserved. Brandon paged through the digital files, shaking his head in disbelief. This is even worse than I thought. He didn't just steal ideas. He systematically targeted innovators, extracted their intellectual property, then discarded them. Your mother knows all this. She's known for years. Pain flashed across Brandon's face. Complicity through silence. The Reynolds family specialty. She also said your father plans to fire me before the board meeting. Then we accelerate our timeline. Brandon's expression hardened with determination. The board meets in 3 days. We present our findings then, before my father can remove you or announce Ethan as successor. What about Madison? She's caught in the middle of this. Brandon hesitated. Madison deserves to know the truth about the family she married into. But Ethan is fully under my father's influence. If Madison learns what we're planning, she might feel obligated to tell him. I thought about Patricia's insistence that I make peace with my sister. Despite everything, I missed Madison desperately. I need to try to talk to her, I decided. She deserves warning, at least. Brandon nodded reluctantly. Just be careful what you reveal. Once we start this, there's no turning back. I texted Madison that night, asking to meet privately. To my surprise, she agreed, suggesting breakfast at a cafe near her apartment, far from both Reynolds' headquarters and the family estate. She looked exhausted when she arrived, designer clothes and perfect makeup not quite concealing the strain in her eyes. We ordered coffee in awkward silence before she finally spoke. I've missed you, Lex. The simple admission broke something inside me. I've missed you too. This job, this company, it's changing you, Madison said quietly. You're getting pulled into Reynolds politics. It's dangerous. I know more than you think about the Reynolds family, I replied, choosing my words carefully. About how William built his company. Madison tensed. What are you talking about? I took a deep breath. Dad worked for Reynolds Enterprises 30 years ago. William stole his cooling system design and built his fortune on it. Her eyes widened in shock. That's not possible. It's true. I have proof. I reached for her hand across the table. There's going to be a reckoning at the board meeting, Madison. I wanted you to be prepared. A reckoning? What does that mean? Fear crept into her voice. What are you and Brandon planning? The truth needs to come out. About Dad, about other innovations William appropriated over the years. Madison pulled her hand away. You're going to destroy Ethan's family. My family now. This isn't about destroying anyone. It's about justice and changing the company culture going forward. By humiliating William? By taking away Ethan's birthright? Madison's voice rose slightly before she caught herself, lowering it to an urgent whisper. Ethan isn't responsible for what his father did decades ago. No, but he's being groomed to continue the same corrupt practices, I argued. The company needs new leadership. Brandon's leadership, you mean? Madison's eyes narrowed. Are you sure this crusade for justice isn't just about helping your boss stage a corporate coup? The accusation stung because I'd asked myself the same question many times. This is bigger than Brandon's ambitions. It's about doing the right thing. The right thing? Madison laughed humorlessly. You know what Ethan's been told? That Brandon hired you specifically to undermine William because you hold a grudge from your father's time at the company. That you're using company resources to build a false case against William. I stared at her, horrified. That's not true. Isn't it? You took this job without telling me, knowing our family history with the Reynolds. You've been meeting secretly with Brandon for months. Now you're planning some kind of public takedown at a board meeting. Tears filled Madison's eyes. You've chosen your side, Alexis, just like Dad warned you would. Madison, please. Ethan says William is planning to fire you. Maybe that would be best for everyone. She stood, gathering her purse. I love you, Lex. But I can't support what you're doing to my husband's family. She left me sitting alone, my coffee growing cold as I confronted the painful reality. No matter how this played out, someone I cared about would be hurt. My father, Madison, Brandon, even myself. We were all caught in the crossfire of decades-old decisions, and the collateral damage was mounting. That afternoon, I received an email requesting my presence in William's office the following morning. The termination I'd been warned about was coming, which meant Brandon and I had less than 24 hours to prepare our case for the board. As I gathered the evidence we'd accumulated, including Patricia's damning files, I realized I was standing at a moral crossroads. I could walk away now, preserve my relationship with Madison, and let the past remain buried. Or I could push forward, seeking justice for my father and potentially reshaping Reynolds Enterprises for the better, but at significant personal cost. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. Some truths demand to be heard, regardless of the consequences. I encrypted the files, sent copies to Brandon, and prepared for battle. Whatever happened tomorrow would change everything. For the Reynolds family, for my own family, and for me. I only hoped that when the dust settled, there would be something left worth salvaging from the wreckage. The Reynolds Enterprises boardroom resembled a courtroom that morning, all polished mahogany and tension-filled silence as the board members took their seats. These 12 individuals collectively controlled one of America's largest private corporations, their combined net worth exceeding the GDP of some small nations. They were accustomed to quarterly presentations and strategic discussions, not the corporate drama about to unfold. William Reynolds sat at the head of the table, the picture of confident authority in his bespoke suit. To his right sat Ethan, nervously adjusting his tie, while Patricia maintained her usual elegant composure several seats down. Brandon and I had strategically positioned ourselves at the opposite end of the table, our evidence organized in folders before us. I could feel William's eyes on me, calculating and cold. He'd summoned me to his office earlier that morning, but I'd sent a polite email declining, citing preparation for the board presentation he'd asked me to deliver on our sustainability initiatives. It was a thin excuse, but it had bought us the time we needed. Before we begin with the agenda, William announced once everyone was settled, "I'd like to address a personnel matter." His gaze fixed on me. "Miss Crawford's probationary period has concluded, and I've determined her services are no longer required at Reynolds Enterprises." Murmurs rippled through the boardroom. Brandon immediately raised his hand. "Point of order, Father. As Miss Crawford's direct supervisor, any termination decision should come through me first. As CEO, I have final authority on all executive hiring and firing," William countered smoothly. "Perhaps," Brandon replied, his voice steady. "But before any decisions are made about Miss Crawford's employment, the board should hear the presentation we've prepared. It directly impacts the future of this company." William's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We have a set agenda." "I motion to amend the agenda to hear Brandon and Alexis's presentation," said Harold Jenkins, one of the oldest board members and a longtime friend of Brandon's. "Seconded," added Sophia Morales, another independent director. William could hardly refuse without appearing dictatorial. "Very well. You have 15 minutes. Brandon nodded to me, and I connected my laptop to the presentation system. The title slide appeared on the screen: Intellectual Property Acquisition and Attribution at Reynolds Enterprises, a Historical Analysis. William's expression darkened as he registered what was happening. "What is the meaning of this?" "An examination of company history," Brandon replied calmly, rising to stand beside me. "Specifically, how certain key technologies that built this company were acquired." I began the presentation, keeping my voice professional despite my pounding heart. Reynolds Enterprises' success was built on innovation, particularly in manufacturing processes and energy efficiency systems. The cornerstone was the Reynolds cooling system patented in 1994, which reduced energy consumption by 40% while increasing processing speeds. I clicked to the next slide, displaying the original patent application with William Reynolds listed as the inventor. This technology generated an estimated $12 billion in revenue over 2 decades and remains fundamental to our manufacturing division today. The board members nodded, familiar with the company's origin story. Then I clicked to the next slide, my father's original proposal, complete with detailed schematics and his signature, dated 6 months before William's patent application. This is the original design, created by Richard Crawford, a junior engineer employed by Reynolds Enterprises in 1993. He was terminated shortly after submitting this proposal, which is identical in all technical aspects to the patented system. Gasps and murmurs filled the room, William's face flushed with anger. "This is preposterous. Where did you obtain these documents?" "From the company archives," Brandon interjected smoothly, not mentioning Patricia's flash drive. And this wasn't an isolated incident. We proceeded to show evidence of 5 other major innovations that followed the same pattern, brilliant ideas from employees or partners who were subsequently pushed out, their intellectual property repackaged under William's name. In total, I concluded, we've identified 23 instances of intellectual property misappropriation over 3 decades, representing approximately 60% of Reynolds Enterprises' core technological portfolio. The boardroom had fallen into stunned silence. Several directors were frantically taking notes, while others stared at William with expressions ranging from shock to calculation. Ethan looked physically ill. William slammed his hand on the table. "This is a coordinated attack on my character and legacy. These cherry-picked documents lack context. I refined and developed those rough ideas into viable technologies." "The documentation suggests otherwise," Brandon replied. "The technical specifications remained virtually unchanged from submission to patent. This company has created thousands of jobs and billions in shareholder value under my leadership," William countered, appealing to the board. "Are we going to let disgruntled employees and my resentful son rewrite history?" Gerald Thompson, the lead independent director, cleared his throat. "These are serious allegations that warrant investigation. Perhaps we should adjourn to consider." "There's one more relevant piece of information," I interrupted, heart racing. "My name is Alexis Crawford. Richard Crawford is my father." The revelation landed like a bomb in the boardroom. William's eyes widened with sudden recognition. "You're Crawford's daughter? This is why you infiltrated my company? For revenge?" "For truth," I corrected. and to ensure that Reynolds Enterprises' future isn't built on the same corrupt foundation as its past? William turned to the board, voice rising. Do you see now? This has been a coordinated effort to undermine me. Brandon hired Crawford's daughter specifically to build this case. It's a personal vendetta, not a legitimate concern for the company. Is this true? Gerald asked Brandon. Did you know who Alexis was when you hired her? Brandon met the board's questioning gazes directly. Yes. I discovered the connection to Richard Crawford while researching the cooling system patent. I hired Alexis because she's brilliant and qualified, but also because I believed she deserved to know how her father's work was used to build our fortune. This is absurd, William sputtered, turning to Ethan for support. Tell them, son. Tell them what this really is. Ethan looked trapped, glancing from his father to Madison, who had slipped into the back of the boardroom at some point during the presentation. Her face was pale with shock. I don't know what to say, Ethan stammered. I wasn't involved in any of this. Exactly, Brandon said quietly. You weren't involved because father keeps you insulated from the real business, yet he plans to name you as his successor at next week's shareholder meeting. Several board members straightened at this news, clearly hearing it for the first time. The succession plan is my prerogative as CEO and majority shareholder, William insisted. Actually, Brandon countered, the board must approve any succession plan by charter. And given these revelations, I believe the board should carefully consider whether the current leadership model serves the company's future. The tension in the room was palpable. William's face had grown alarmingly red, his breathing labored as he stared at Brandon with naked fury. Suddenly, he clutched at his chest, gasping for air as he collapsed back into his chair. Father! Ethan cried, rushing to his side. Call an ambulance, Patricia ordered, already moving toward her husband with surprising speed. Chaos erupted as board members jumped to their feet. Brandon and I exchanged alarmed glances as William was laid carefully on the floor, Patricia loosening his tie while Sophia, a former nurse, checked his pulse. Within minutes, paramedics arrived and whisked William away on a stretcher, Patricia and Ethan following closely behind. The remaining board members huddled in shocked discussion while Brandon and I stood frozen at our end of the table. This isn't how I wanted this to go, Brandon said quietly. Of course not, I replied, still processing the dramatic turn of events. Do you think he'll be all right? My father is too stubborn to die from a heart attack, Brandon said, though worry lined his face. But regardless of his health, things have changed permanently today. Gerald Thompson approached us, his expression grave. The board is calling an emergency closed session to discuss these allegations and the leadership situation. Both of you should make yourselves available for questions in the coming days. As the boardroom emptied, Madison remained in her seat at the back, staring at me with an unreadable expression. I gathered my courage and walked over to her. Madison, Did you know this would happen? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The presentation, yes. William's collapse, no. That was never the intention. Madison shook her head slowly. You've turned my whole world upside down, Lex. Everything Ethan thought he knew about his father, about his future, it's all in shambles now. The truth needed to come out, I said gently. For Dad's sake, for the company's future. And yes, for my own peace of mind. The truth, Madison echoed, a tear slipping down her cheek. I don't even know what that is anymore. She stood to leave, pausing briefly beside me. I hope it was worth it. As she walked away, Brandon approached, looking exhausted but resolved. The board will take days to deliberate. William's health adds another layer of complexity. What happens now? I asked, suddenly feeling the weight of everything we'd set in motion. Now, Brandon said, placing a hand on my shoulder, we wait. And prepare for whatever comes next. Outside the boardroom windows, the Boston skyline gleamed in the afternoon sun, the Reynolds Enterprises logo prominently displayed on buildings and billboards across the city. I wondered how much of that empire would remain intact after today's revelations, and what my place in it would be when the dust settled. One thing was certain, there was no going back to the way things were before. For better or worse, we had changed the course of Reynolds Enterprises forever. The week following William's collapse unfolded like a corporate thriller. William was diagnosed with stress-induced angina, painful but not life-threatening. He remained hospitalized for observation, effectively removing him from the immediate aftermath of our presentation. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic if it had been scripted, leading to rumors that he had faked the episode to escape the confrontation. Reynolds Enterprises descended into barely controlled chaos. The board convened in marathon closed-door sessions, employees whispered in hallways, and the PR department worked overtime to manage the growing media speculation about internal restructuring at one of America's largest private companies. Brandon and I found ourselves in a strange limbo, neither fired nor fully embraced. We were summoned repeatedly to answer the board's questions, provide documentation, and clarify the timeline of events. The company's legal team and external counsel were evaluating our evidence, particularly the intellectual property claims. Madison had gone radio silent, accompanying Ethan to the hospital each day to support her father-in-law and husband. I'd sent several texts trying to explain myself more fully, but received only a terse reply, "Need time to process everything." On the third day, I was surprised to receive a call from Patricia Reynolds requesting a private meeting at her home. The Reynolds estate seemed different in daylight, still imposing but somehow more vulnerable, like its master. Patricia welcomed me in the solarium, where morning light streamed through glass walls surrounding a lush indoor garden. She looked tired but composed, pouring tea from a silver service. "William is being discharged tomorrow," she said without preamble. "His doctors recommend reduced stress and a lighter workload." "I'm glad he's recovering," I said sincerely. Despite everything, I'd never wished him physical harm. Patricia's smile was wry. "The doctors may recommend rest, but William is already making calls from his hospital bed. The board's investigation has him concerned." "Has the board reached any decisions?" "Not officially, but the direction is clear. The evidence you and Brandon presented was compelling. The company's legal team has verified most of it." She stirred her tea thoughtfully. "The board can't ignore such systematic intellectual property theft, especially when the individuals involved might pursue legal action once the information becomes public." "Like my father," I noted. "Precisely. The potential liability is enormous. The board recognizes that." Patricia set down her cup. "They're preparing a settlement package for your father and the other affected innovators. Full recognition of their contributions, financial compensation, and public acknowledgement of their role in building Reynolds Enterprises." Relief and vindication washed over me. That's what I wanted for my father, recognition of what was taken from him. "And Brandon?" I asked. "What about the succession plan?" Patricia's expression grew more guarded. "The situation is fluid. William has been asked to delay any succession announcements pending the completion of the board's review." Translation: William's absolute authority had been checked for the first time in decades. "Madison believes I orchestrated all this out of revenge," I said quietly. "That I infiltrated the company specifically to hurt her new family." "Did you?" Patricia asked, her gaze penetrating. I considered the question honestly. When I first accepted the job, maybe part of me wanted justice that bordered on revenge. But the deeper I got into the company, the more I saw how the toxic culture affected everyone: employees, partners, even the Reynolds family itself. This wasn't just about my father anymore. Patricia nodded slowly. "Madison will understand that eventually. She's intelligent and has a good heart. But she's also newly married and loyal to Ethan, who is struggling with these revelations about his father." "I never wanted to hurt Madison." "I know, give her time." Patricia poured more tea. "In the meantime, I have a message from William." I tensed. "From William?" "He wants to meet with you. Privately. Once he's discharged." The request stunned me. "Why would he want to meet with me?" "William is many things. Ruthless, ambitious, occasionally unethical, but he's not a fool. He recognizes when a situation has fundamentally changed." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "And perhaps a brush with mortality provides certain perspectives." I wasn't sure what to make of this development. "I'll consider it." "Do more than consider it, Alexis. Meet with him. For closure, if nothing else." Back at the office, Brandon was waiting in my doorway, excitement evident on his face. "The board just sent out a notice. Emergency general meeting tomorrow at 10. All senior management required to attend." "Did they indicate what it's about?" "No, but my sources say they've reached decisions about both the intellectual property issues and the leadership structure." Brandon lowered his voice. This is it, Alexis. The culmination of everything we've worked for. I should have shared his excitement, but my conversation with Patricia had left me thoughtful. Have you spoken with your mother? Your father wants to meet with me. Surprise flashed across Brandon's face. For what purpose? I don't know. Patricia suggested it might be important for closure. Brandon frowned. Be careful. My father rarely does anything without multiple motives. I know, but I'm thinking I might meet with him anyway. The emergency meeting the next day transformed the company in ways few could have predicted. The boardroom was packed, with senior managers standing along the walls after the seats filled. Gerald Thompson, as lead independent director, took charge in William's absence. After extensive review of evidence presented to this board regarding intellectual property acquisition practices at Reynolds Enterprises, we have reached several important decisions, Gerald began formally. First, the company acknowledges that certain innovations and technologies were inappropriately attributed in our historical records. We will be establishing a reparations committee to identify all affected parties and provide appropriate recognition and compensation. Murmurs swept through the room as Gerald continued. Second, to ensure transparency and ethical practices moving forward, the board has approved a significant restructuring of corporate governance. Effective immediately, the roles of chairman and CEO will be separated. William Reynolds will transition to the role of chairman emeritus, focusing on strategic advising while stepping back from day-to-day operations. Gasps and whispers erupted. William Reynolds, the company's founder and absolute ruler for 4 decades, was being effectively demoted. Finally, Gerald continued once the noise subsided, the board has unanimously approved Brandon Reynolds as the new Chief Executive Officer of Reynolds Enterprises. With a mandate to implement corporate governance reforms and ethical business practices while maintaining the company's market leadership. Brandon, seated beside me, maintained a professionally neutral expression, but I could sense his vindication. Years of being sidelined by his father, of advocating for change only to be dismissed as naive, had culminated in this moment of triumph. The meeting continued with details about the transition plan and instructions for department heads, but the essential message was clear. Reynolds Enterprises was entering a new era. As people filed out afterward, I received a text from an unknown number. 4 p.m. My home office. William. Brandon caught me checking the message. My father? I nodded. 4 o'clock today. I'll come with you. No, I said firmly. This is something I need to do alone. Brandon studied me for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. Just remember who he is, chairman emeritus or not. William Reynolds doesn't surrender power gracefully. The Reynolds estate seemed different yet again as I arrived that afternoon, quieter, less imposing, as if the house itself sensed its master's diminished status. A nurse showed me to William's home office, a wood-paneled sanctuary lined with books and industry awards. William sat behind his desk, looking pale but alert in casual clothes rather than his usual suit. The hospital stay had aged him somehow, the invincible titan suddenly mortal. Miss Crawford, he greeted me, gesturing to the chair across from him. Thank you for coming. Mr. Reynolds, I replied, taking the seat but maintaining my guard. He studied me for a long moment. You have your father's eyes. I should have recognized it immediately. I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. I've had time to reflect in the hospital, William said, steepling his fingers. On my legacy, on the company's future, on the choices I made that brought us to this point. Choices like stealing my father's cooling system design, I couldn't help asking. William didn't flinch from the accusation. Yes, that and other acquisitions of intellectual property. I told myself it was business, that ideas needed my resources and influence to reach their potential. He sighed heavily. The justifications sound hollow even to me now. The admission surprised me. I'd expected denials, not confession. The board has informed me of the settlement package being prepared for your father and the others. It's substantial. Life-changing money, plus long overdue recognition. It's not about the money, I said. It's about the truth. Yes, I'm beginning to understand that. William's gaze was direct, penetrating. You could have leaked this information to the press, filed lawsuits, created a public relations nightmare. Instead, you worked within the system to force change from within. I respect that strategic choice. Coming from William Reynolds, this was high praise indeed. Your father was brilliant, he continued unexpectedly. His cooling system design was elegant, innovative, far ahead of its time. I recognized its potential immediately. Then why not partner with him? Why push him out and steal his work? William considered the question seriously. Because that wasn't how I operated then. I saw business as warfare, winners and losers, with no middle ground. He gestured to the empire visible through his window. It built all this. But at a cost I'm only now beginning to calculate. The vulnerability in his admission was jarring. William Reynolds, admitting regret? Brandon will make changes, William continued. Some necessary, some perhaps idealistic. But the company needs new leadership for a new era. His eyes met mine directly, and he'll need allies. People who understand both innovation and integrity. People like you. I realized with surprise that this wasn't just a confession, it was an olive branch of sorts. William Reynolds was acknowledging my place in the company's future. I came here seeking justice for my father, I said carefully. But I've found something I wasn't expecting. What's that? A chance to help transform Reynolds Enterprises into something better. Something that honors innovation rather than exploiting it. William nodded slowly. Perhaps that's the true reckoning here. Not just acknowledging past wrongs, but building something better because of the lessons learned. As I left the Reynolds estate, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I was carrying, the burden of my father's stolen legacy, of family secrets and corporate intrigue. There would be challenges ahead as Brandon reshaped the company, and I navigated my own role in that transformation. My relationship with Madison remained strained, though Patricia's words gave me hope for eventual reconciliation. But for the first time since joining Reynolds Enterprises, I felt I was exactly where I needed to be, not just for my father's vindication, but for my own future. The company that had been built partly on my father's stolen idea was now becoming a place where I could help ensure such theft never happened again. The reckoning had come, and from its ashes, something new was emerging. 1 year later, I stood at the podium in the Reynolds Enterprises auditorium, surveying the assembled employees, board members, and special guests gathered for the company's annual innovation showcase. The atmosphere was electric, buzzing with the kind of genuine excitement that had been missing under William's rigid leadership. Welcome to the first annual Richard Crawford Innovation Awards, I began, my voice steady despite the emotion tightening my chest. Today we celebrate not just groundbreaking ideas, but the brilliant minds behind them. So much had changed in 12 months. Reynolds Enterprises had transformed under Brandon's leadership, shedding its cutthroat culture for one that fostered collaboration and ethical innovation. The corporate structure had been flattened, communication channels opened, and most significantly, a new intellectual property policy implemented that ensured inventors received proper credit and compensation for their ideas. My role had evolved dramatically as well. What began as a sustainability management position had expanded into my current role as CEO of the Innovation and Ethics Division, a new branch of the company focused on developing environmentally responsible technologies while ensuring ethical business practices throughout the organization. From my position on the stage, I could see my father in the front row, looking distinguished despite his silver hair. Beside him sat Madison and Ethan, their presence a testament to the healing that had gradually occurred within our fractured families. The path to reconciliation with Madison had been painful but ultimately rewarding. For months after the board meeting confrontation, she had maintained her distance, torn between loyalty to her husband and understanding of my actions. The breakthrough came unexpectedly at our father's recognition ceremony, where Reynolds Enterprises officially acknowledged his contribution to the cooling system technology and presented him with both substantial financial compensation and professional recognition. Watching our father receive the validation he'd been denied for decades broke something open between Madison and me. We'd cried together afterward, finally talking honestly about the wedge William's actions had driven between us. Madison admitted she'd been manipulated by the Reynolds family dynamics she hadn't fully understood, while I acknowledged that my quest for justice had sometimes blinded me to her difficult position. I never wanted to hurt you, I'd told her tearfully. I just couldn't let Dad's legacy remain buried. I know, Madison had replied, squeezing my hand. I was caught in the middle, but I should have trusted you more. I'm sorry, Lex. Since then, we'd rebuilt our sisterly bond, stronger for having weathered the storm. Madison had even found her own place within the changing Reynolds empire, leveraging her fashion industry connections to help develop the company's new sustainable textiles initiative. Ethan, too, had evolved in unexpected ways. Freed from his father's domineering expectations, he discovered genuine talents in relationship building and corporate diplomacy. While he lacked Brandon's visionary leadership or my technical expertise, he'd found his niche in client relations and philanthropic initiatives, areas where his natural charm and genuine desire to please served him well. William Reynolds himself remained a complex figure in the company narrative. After his demotion to chairman emeritus, he'd initially retreated from public view, focusing on his health and family. Gradually, however, he'd found a new role as a strategic advisor, contributing his decades of business experience while accepting the ethical guardrails now in place. His relationship with Brandon remained complicated but had developed a new mutual respect born of their clearly defined roles. The Richard Crawford Innovation Awards recognize not just technological brilliance but ethical leadership, I continued in my speech. Each finalist has demonstrated both groundbreaking thinking and a commitment to responsible innovation. As I introduced the nominees, my gaze drifted to Brandon, seated among the executive leadership team. Our professional relationship had deepened into something more personal over the past year, built on shared values and mutual respect. What began as late-night strategy sessions had gradually evolved into dinners, weekend hikes, and eventually, a relationship that balanced our professional partnership with genuine emotional connection. Brandon caught my eye and smiled encouragingly. He understood the significance of this moment for me. The culmination of a journey that began with seeking justice for my father and had transformed into creating lasting change within Reynolds Enterprises. After presenting the awards and congratulating the winners, I joined my family at their table for the reception. Dad looked happier than I'd seen him in years. The weight of his stolen legacy finally lifted from his shoulders. I never thought I'd see the day, he said, gazing around the Reynolds Enterprises headquarters with wonder rather than bitterness. My name on an innovation award, presented in this building. Justice was a long time coming, I acknowledged, but it's sweeter for it. Madison squeezed my hand under the table. You made this happen, Lex. Your courage changed everything. Not just for Dad, I replied, but for all the innovators who'll come after him. That's the real victory. Later that evening, Brandon hosted a smaller celebration at his home, a gathering that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. The Reynolds and Crawford families together, not as adversaries but as allies in the company's new direction. William and Patricia conversed amicably with my father, while Madison and Ethan chatted with Brandon's executive team. As I stepped onto the terrace for a moment of quiet reflection, Brandon joined me, 2 champagne glasses in hand. Quite a transformation, he said, nodding toward the gathering inside. From corporate warfare to family dinner. I smiled, accepting the champagne. Sometimes you need to enter the lion's den to change it from within. Is that what you did? Entered the lion's den when you joined Reynolds Enterprises? I considered the question, watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in gold. Initially, perhaps, I wanted justice for my father, validation of his contribution. But somewhere along the way, it became about something bigger. Creating the company that should have existed all along, Brandon suggested. Exactly. Building something ethical doesn't mean sacrificing success. If anything, it ensures long-term sustainability. I gestured toward the headquarters visible in the distance. Reynolds Enterprises stock is up 20% under your leadership. The ethical innovation approach is working. With your considerable help, Brandon acknowledged, his hand finding mine. I couldn't have navigated this transition without you, Alexis. The warmth in his eyes matched the feeling spreading through my chest. What had begun as a professional alliance had grown into something I hadn't been looking for but now couldn't imagine living without. Inside, laughter erupted as Dad apparently finished telling one of his engineering jokes, the kind that only other engineers usually appreciated. Seeing him integrated into this gathering, respected and valued for his brilliance rather than sidelined, filled me with profound satisfaction. Do you ever think about how differently this could have all played out? I asked Brandon. If my father had received proper credit for his innovation 30 years ago? Often, Brandon admitted. Perhaps Reynolds Enterprises would have been built on partnership rather than appropriation. Perhaps my father would have learned earlier that success doesn't require crushing others. And perhaps we never would have met, I added quietly. Brandon's gaze held mine. Then perhaps this is where we needed to end up all along. Sometimes the path to healing requires first acknowledging the wound. As we rejoined the gathering, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the excluded sister at Madison's wedding to a corporate executive helping reshape one of America's largest companies. From seeking personal vindication to creating systemic change. From outside to inside. The truth had indeed been painful, for both the Crawford and Reynolds families. But that pain had ultimately led to healing, to growth, and to redemption. My father's innovative spirit now lived on not just in the technology he created, but in the awards bearing his name and the corporate culture that now valued creators rather than exploiting them. Sometimes, I realized, you need to enter the lion's den not to slay the lion, but to transform the entire ecosystem. And in doing so, you might just transform yourself as well. What do you think you would have done in my situation? Would you have taken the job at Reynolds Enterprises knowing what my father had experienced, or would you have stayed away? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of corporate intrigue and family redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life drama stories. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, sometimes the doors others try to close for you lead to opportunities beyond your wildest dreams.